They called it a legacy. I called it a gilded cage. For 30 years, I was the perfect heir to the Vance fashion empire, stitching their dreams into silk. But my dream? It was a camera, a story, a life that was finally mine. They told me to choose the billions or my soul. They told me if I left, I'd be disowned, destroyed, forgotten. They thought they could break me. They were wrong. They said I destroyed their legacy. I said I was finally creating my own. Before we dive into this heartbreaking journey, have you ever felt trapped between your own dreams and the expectations of your family? Share your experiences in the comments below. I read every single one. Your stories truly help others feel less alone. The ceramic shards bit into my palms, tiny needles of pain that were nothing compared to the ache in my chest. "You are destroying us, Sophia." My father's voice, usually a comforting rumble, now sliced through the opulent dining room like a poisoned blade. The antique vase, a symbol of generations of Vance's velvet, the legacy of luxury, lay in ruin at my feet, mirroring the state of my soul. Aunt Isolde, always impeccably dressed, even for a family crisis, clutched her pearl necklace, her eyes narrowed to slits of pure ice. My younger sister, Theron, usually my closest confidant, stood rigid beside my mother, her face a mask of betrayal. They all looked at me, not as Sophia, their daughter, their niece, their sister, but as a vandal, a traitor to the Vance name. All because I dared to dream of a life beyond silk and sequins. "I'm not destroying anything, Father," I whispered, my voice raw. "I'm trying to build something new. Something that is mine." The words felt hollow, swallowed by the cavernous silence of the room. The scent of old money and faded grandeur seemed to cling to the heavy velvet curtains, suffocating me. This wasn't just a house. It was a mausoleum of expectations, each expectation heavier than the last. For 32 years, I had breathed the air of Vance's velvet, lived by its unspoken rules, and dreamt its collective dreams. But beneath the shimmering surface, a different ambition had begun to stir within me. A wild, untamed longing for the raw, untamed world of documentary filmmaking, far from the polished perfection of haute couture. My father, Lysander Vance, a man whose presence filled any room, stepped closer, his shadow engulfing me. "You're mine? We built this empire from nothing. Your grandmother, my mother, started with a single sewing machine in a cramped apartment, stitching dreams into reality. Every thread, every bead, every stitch is soaked in the sweat and tears of our ancestors. And you, Sophia, the one I poured everything into, groomed to take over, you spit on their memory? You spit on our legacy?" His words were hammers, striking blows directly to my heart, each one echoing the silent accusations from the rest of my family. The weight of their disapproval pressed down on me, a tangible force threatening to crush the last vestiges of my independent spirit. I wanted to scream, to tell them that their legacy felt more like a prison than a privilege. I wanted to explain that the world of fashion, once a vibrant tapestry of creativity, had become a gilded cage, slowly stifling my own artistic voice. I longed to create stories, to capture the raw, unfiltered truth of humanity, not just design clothes that would eventually hang forgotten in someone's closet. But the words caught in my throat, tangled with a lifetime of trying to please, to conform, to be the perfect Vance heir. The ceramic shards dug deeper into my skin, a physical manifestation of the lacerations in my soul. I looked around at their unyielding faces, each one a mirror reflecting my failure to meet their impossible standards. My mother, Seraphina, usually the gentle peacemaker, finally spoke, her voice strained. "Sophia, darling, please reconsider. This is your birthright. This is who we are. What will people say? What will our clients think? You have an obligation." Her words trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. An obligation to them, to the business, to a life I no longer desired. I closed my eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the dust and grime on my cheek. The broken vase lay between us, a stark symbol of the rift that had just opened, wide and irreparable. It felt like I was standing on a precipice, with the familiar, suffocating world of Vance's velvet on one side, and the terrifying, exhilarating unknown on the other. And as I opened my eyes, I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I couldn't go back. My earliest memories are bathed in the shimmering light of silk and the soft rustle of chiffon. The Vance's velvet atelier, a sprawling space above our family home, was my playground. While other children built sandcastles, I draped miniature fabrics over doll mannequins, imagining grand gowns. My grandmother, the formidable matriarch known simply as Nana Vance, would often pull me onto her lap, her gnarled fingers, always adorned with thimbles, tracing patterns on my palm. "See this, Sophia?" she'd whisper, her voice raspy with years of commanding seamstresses. "This is the magic. The fabric breathes, the needle dances. One day, this will all be yours, my little star." Her words, meant to inspire, felt less like a blessing and more like a prophecy I was bound to fulfill. My childhood was a carefully curated path towards succession, while Theron, 3 years younger, showed a keen interest in finance and the business side of Vance's velvet. My artistic flair was nurtured. I was sent to the finest design schools, my sketchbooks filled with vibrant, innovative concepts. My father, Lysander, would beam with pride at my designs, often declaring, "Sophia has her Nana's eye, her mother's grace, and a vision all her own. She is the future of Vance's velvet." These pronouncements, while validating on the surface, subtly tightened the invisible chains that bound me. Every compliment, every accolade, every whispered expectation further solidified my predetermined destiny, leaving little room for my own nascent desires to take root and grow. The first crack in my golden cage appeared during my gap year, a supposed cultural immersion trip to Southeast Asia before my final year of design studies. It was there, amidst the bustling markets and ancient temples, that I stumbled upon a local film crew documenting the lives of silk weavers. The raw energy, the storytelling power of the camera, the way it captured fleeting emotions and profound truths, it utterly captivated me. I spent weeks shadowing them, learning about aperture, composition, and the silent language of light. For the first time, I felt a spark ignite within me that had nothing to do with fabric or fashion. It was the thrill of capturing a moment, of crafting a narrative that resonated beyond the superficial. When I returned to the Vance estate, the familiar scent of expensive perfumes and polished wood felt different, almost stifling. The vibrant colors of the silk seemed muted, less exciting. My sketchbook, once a sanctuary for fashion designs, now held storyboards for short documentaries, ideas for capturing untold stories. I tried to speak to Theron about it, about this new passion that had taken hold. But she merely smiled. "That's lovely, Sophia. Such a wonderful way to relax. But you know, the autumn collection needs your full attention. Father's already excited about your new embroidery techniques." Her response, though gentle, was a dismissive wave, a subtle reminder that my personal interests were secondary to the family's business. The spark, however, refused to be extinguished. It smoldered beneath the surface, a secret fire I tended in the quiet hours of the night. I devoured books on cinematography, watched documentaries with a new, critical eye, and even bought a small, discreet camera, hiding it away like a forbidden treasure. The more I learned, the more I realized that my true calling lay not in draping fabric, but in framing reality. The weight of my family's legacy, once a comforting blanket, now felt like a suffocating shroud, threatening to smother the budding filmmaker within me. I knew, with a growing certainty, that the day would come when I would have to choose between the golden cage and the vast, uncertain sky. The tension in our family wasn't a sudden storm. It was a slow, creeping frost, that settled in after my return from Asia. It started subtly, with missed family dinners, late nights at the atelier that were actually spent editing short films on my hidden laptop, and a growing disinterest in the upcoming collections. My father, bless his traditional heart, initially dismissed it as a phase, a post-travel wanderlust. "You just need to get back into the rhythm, Sophia," he'd say, clapping me on the shoulder. "A few more successful shows, and you'll forget all about these hobbies." His words, intended to reassure, only fueled the quiet rebellion brewing inside me. My hobbies weren't hobbies. They were my lifeline, my escape from the suffocating expectations. Theron, ever the pragmatic one, was the first to openly question my commitment. She handled the financial side of Vance's Velvet with a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue when provoked. "Are you even looking at these sales figures, Sophia?" she'd demand, tossing a quarterly report onto my desk. "Your designs are still selling." "Yes, but your presence isn't there. The clients are asking about your engagement. They expect the heir apparent to be fully invested, not off somewhere contemplating art films." Her words, delivered with a thinly veiled accusation, hit a nerve. I knew she was right, in a way. I was emotionally disengaged, my heart already half invested in a different world. Aunt Isolde, my father's younger sister and the head of public relations for Vance's Velvet, was more direct, her words often laced with a chilling sweetness. "Darling Sophia," she'd coo, "we all understand the need for personal expression. But you must remember, darling, the Vance name is not merely a brand, it's a standard. Your unconventional interests are beginning to reflect poorly on that standard. One can only imagine what the fashion critics would say if they knew the future of Vance's Velvet was more interested in poverty tourism than haute couture." The sting of her words, the blatant dismissal of my passion as poverty tourism, felt like a deliberate blow, designed to shame me back into line. My mother, Serafina, was caught in the middle, a fragile bridge between my burgeoning dreams and my family's ironclad expectations. I'd catch her watching me, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and deep sorrow. She would leave small, encouraging notes on my pillow. "Your grandmother always said a true artist must follow her heart, but also remember her roots." Or try to facilitate conversations with my father, which invariably ended in frustration and slammed doors. Her unspoken worry, her quiet pleading, was almost harder to bear than the outright anger of the others. I knew she loved me, but her fear for the family's stability, her ingrained loyalty to the Vance legacy, always won out. The rift widened with each passing month. Family dinners, once a lively affair, became strained silences, punctuated by forced pleasantries. My contributions to design meetings grew sparser, my mind often miles away, sketching out camera angles instead of seam lines. They saw my growing detachment as a betrayal, a deliberate act of sabotage against everything they had built. I saw it as a desperate struggle for self-preservation, a fight to keep a small flame of my true self alive. The chasm between us grew deeper, filled with unspoken accusations and unfulfilled expectations, a silent war being waged in the heart of our opulent home. I knew it couldn't last. Something was bound to break, and soon. The day the ultimatum came, the air in the Vance estate felt thick, heavy with unspoken tension. It was a crisp autumn morning, but the sunlight streaming through the arched windows did little to dispel the gloom that had settled over the breakfast table. Father cleared his throat, a sound that always signaled an important, often uncomfortable pronouncement. My mother gripped her teacup, her knuckles white. Theron stared intently at her plate, avoiding my gaze. Aunt Isolde, ever the picture of composure, watched me with an almost clinical curiosity, like a scientist observing a specimen. I knew, instinctively, that this wasn't going to be another gentle persuasion. This was Judgment Day. "Sophia," Father began, his voice surprisingly calm, almost chillingly so, "we've been patient, We've allowed you your artistic explorations, but Vance's Velvet is not a hobby. It is a multi-million-dollar enterprise, employing hundreds, supporting families, and frankly, your heart hasn't been in it. Not truly. Your recent designs lack the spark, the passion that once defined your work. Our key investors are noticing. Our clients are noticing. And your family? We are deeply concerned. He paused, letting his words hang in the air, each one a perfectly weighted stone dropping into a silent pool. I braced myself, my stomach churning. I knew what was coming, had anticipated it for months, but the reality of it still felt like a punch to the gut. So, what are you saying, Father? I managed, my voice thin, reedy. He met my gaze, his own eyes, usually so warm and loving, now cold and resolute. We are saying you have a choice, Sophia. A clear choice. You either commit, fully and unequivocally, to Vance's Velvet, to your legacy, to your family. You put aside these film ventures, whatever they are, and you dedicate yourself entirely to the business. Or, he paused, his voice dropping, you walk away, completely. My breath hitched. Walk away. The words echoed in my mind. A terrifying freedom. But then came the caveat. The bitter pill I knew would be impossible to swallow. If you walk away, Aunt Isolde interjected, her voice smooth as polished stone. You walk away from everything. The family name, the trust funds, the estate, any claim to the Vance legacy. You would be, in essence, disowned. You would be Sophia Vance, but not a Vance. Do you understand the implications, darling? Her smile was saccharine, but her eyes held a triumphant glint, as if she had been waiting for this moment. The unspoken message was clear. Choose us, or lose us. Not just the business, but the familial ties themselves. The love, the support. The very identity I had known my entire life. My mother looked away, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. Theron finally met my gaze, her eyes a mix of genuine sorrow and a flicker of something else, perhaps relief, perhaps a glimmer of her own ambition now unhindered. My world, already fractured, felt like it was about to shatter completely. This wasn't just about leaving a job. It was about severing the deepest roots of my existence. I need time, I choked out, the words barely audible. Father nodded, his expression unyielding. You have until the end of the month, Sophia. But know this, once you make your decision, there is no turning back. This is not a negotiation. This is the future of Vance's Velvet. This is the future of our family. He pushed back his chair, the scraping sound loud in the silence. As he walked away, followed by Aunt Isolde and Theron, I was left alone at the grand dining table, staring at the perfectly arranged silver. The choice felt impossible, a knife pressed against my soul, forcing me to cut away a part of myself, no matter which path I chose. The end of the month arrived, a relentless march of days that felt both too fast and agonizingly slow. Each sunrise brought with it the crushing weight of my impending decision. I spent my days in a haze, walking the familiar halls of the Vance estate, each antique painting, each ornate mirror, reflecting not just my image, but the echoes of generations of Vances who had walked this path before me. They seemed to mock my indecision, their silent gazes daring me to break the sacred chain of legacy. The scent of my mother's favorite lilies, usually a comfort, now felt cloying, suffocating, a floral reminder of the beauty that was slowly strangling my own truth. One evening, unable to bear the suffocating silence of my room, I found myself drawn to the old attic. It was a place I hadn't visited since childhood, a dusty, forgotten realm filled with relics of the past. As I climbed the creaking stairs, a forgotten memory surfaced. Nana Vance, a rare twinkle in her stern eyes, showing me a hidden compartment in an antique chest. Every Vance has a secret, little one, she'd whispered. And sometimes, those secrets are the only way to truly understand who we are. I found the chest, covered in a century of dust, and after fumbling with the latch, I discovered the hidden compartment just as she had shown me. Inside, nestled amongst faded lace and yellowed photographs, was a small, leather-bound journal. It wasn't my grandmother's usual meticulous business ledger, but something far more personal. The handwriting was hers, elegant and strong, but the words were filled with a raw emotion I had never known she possessed. She wrote of her early days, not as the formidable matriarch, but as a young woman with a passion for painting, a yearning for a life beyond the rigid expectations of her own aristocratic family. They called it a frivolous pursuit, she'd written, a distraction from my duties. But in truth, it was the only place where I felt truly alive. I devoured the journal's contents, each page a revelation. Nana Vance, the woman who had built Vance's velvet with an iron will, had once dreamt of being an artist, a painter of vibrant landscapes. She had even studied in secret, her canvases hidden away, her dreams deferred, eventually sacrificed for the sake of her family's survival during a tumultuous time. She wrote of the pain of that sacrifice, the quiet grief of letting go of her true passion, and the fierce determination that had fueled her to pour all her creative energy into building Vance's velvet, making it a masterpiece in its own right, a testament to her unfulfilled artistic soul. The final entry brought tears to my eyes. To my granddaughter, if you ever find this, do not make my mistake, Sophia. Do not let fear or duty extinguish the fire within you. A legacy is not just what you inherit, it is what you create. It is the brave choice to live your own truth, even if it means breaking free from the gilded chains of expectation. Find your own canvas, my darling. Paint your own life. Her words were a balm to my aching heart, a secret whisper of encouragement from beyond the grave. It was as if Nana Vance herself was giving me permission, a powerful, emotional endorsement to choose myself. The ultimatum no longer felt like a prison sentence, but a door to my freedom, illuminated by the wisdom of a woman I thought I knew, but had only just truly understood. The morning of the deadline arrived, gray and heavy, mirroring the tempest within me. I walked into the ornate drawing room, where my family awaited, my spine straight, the leather-bound journal clutched tightly in my hand. The usual suspects were there. Father, rigid with expectation. Mother, her eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night. Theron, a nervous energy radiating from her. And Aunt Isolde, Audie, a predatory gleam in her eyes. The silence was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, marking the seconds until my fate was sealed. I have made my decision, I stated, my voice steadier than I felt. Father nodded, a tense muscle ticking in his jaw. And? He prompted, his voice laced with an impatience that bordered on aggression. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of Nana Vance's words fill me. I am leaving Vance's velvet, I declared, the words feeling both terrifying and exhilarating. As they left my lips, a collective gasp rippled through the room. My mother stifled a sob. Theron's eyes widened. Aunt Isolde's triumphant smirk flickered, replaced by genuine shock. Are you insane, Sophia? Father roared, slamming his fist on the polished mahogany table. You throw away everything? The name? The future? Your birthright? For some fleeting dream of yours? His face was a mask of furious disappointment, his betrayal etched deeply into every line. You are destroying your family's legacy, he repeated the accusation. The words a familiar, painful echo of the night the vase broke. He looked at me as if I were a stranger, an alien who had invaded his perfectly ordered world. No, Father, I said, my voice gaining strength. I am not destroying it. I am redefining it. And I am honoring it in a way you could never understand. I held up the leather journal. This belonged to Nana Vance, our founder, the woman you all revere as the epitome of Vance's velvet. Their expressions shifted from anger to confusion, then to a hesitant curiosity. No one had ever mentioned Nana Vance having personal journals. Her life was always presented as solely dedicated to the business. The very idea seemed to contradict the carefully constructed narrative of her unwavering devotion. Before Nana Vance became the formidable businesswoman, the visionary behind Vance's velvet, I continued, my gaze sweeping across their faces. She was an artist, a painter. She dreamt of a life filled with canvases and color, a life that was brutally cut short by duty and expectation. I opened the journal, reading aloud selected passages, her raw confessions of unfulfilled dreams, her quiet sorrow, her ultimate sacrifice. As her words filled the room, a palpable shift occurred. My mother's eyes welled with tears, a new understanding dawning. Theron looked stunned. A piece of family history she never knew existing. Even Aunt Isolde's hard gaze softened, a hint of something resembling regret touching her features. I closed the journal, placing it gently on the table. Nana Vance chose her family, and she poured her artistic spirit into building this empire. But in her final words, she urged me not to make her mistake, to find my own canvas, to paint my own life. A legacy, she wrote, is not just what you inherit, but what you create. And my creation will be stories, not just silks. The revelation hung in the air. A silent bomb dropped into the heart of their carefully constructed narrative. The weight of their judgment was still there. But now, mixed with a profound, unsettling new truth, the betrayal I felt from them was now tinged with a deeper understanding of the sacrifices that had forged our family. Sacrifices I was determined not to repeat. My revelation of Nana Vance's journal did not bring the immediate understanding or acceptance I had desperately hoped for. Instead, it ignited a different kind of fury, a resentment born from the shattering of a revered family myth. My father, after the initial shock, refused to acknowledge the journal's authenticity, dismissing it as old ramblings, distorted by time, not the true essence of our matriarch. He clung to his version of Nana Vance, the unwavering titan of industry, unable to reconcile it with the vulnerable artist I had revealed. This denial felt like another betrayal, a refusal to see the truth, even when it was laid bare before them. Aunt Isolde, ever the strategist, saw the journal as a weapon I had used against them. Her voice, once laced with sweet venom, now carried an icy chill. So, you used the revered dead to justify your abandonment? She sneered. How very convenient, Sophia. But a legacy, darling, is not about individual desires. It's about collective strength. Your grandmother sacrificed her dreams for the greater good of this family. And you use her private thoughts to shirk your responsibilities. It's a disgrace. Her words twisted Nana's message, perverting it into an accusation that made my blood run cold. Theron, however, was visibly shaken. I saw her later that day, alone in the library, poring over the journal, her expression pensive, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. For a fleeting moment, I thought I had reached her. But the deeply ingrained loyalty to the Vance name, and perhaps a burgeoning ambition of her own, proved stronger. A week later, she approached me, her voice firm, devoid of the earlier uncertainty. I understand Nana's pain, Sophia, she began. But her sacrifice made us. It is our strength. You're choosing a path that weakens everything she built, everything we stand for. And honestly, it feels like you're leaving me to pick up the pieces, to carry the entire weight of this company alone. Her words, while delivered with a semblance of empathy, felt like the sharpest cut of all. It wasn't just an accusation of selfishness. It was an unspoken threat, a foreshadowing of the burden she believed I was imposing upon her. I knew then that the familial bond with Theron, once so strong, was irrevocably fractured. The unspoken understanding between us, forged in childhood secrets and shared dreams, had withered under the harsh glare of family expectations and competing desires. My heart ached, not just for the loss of my place in the family, but for the profound chasm that had opened between my sister and me. The final, unforgivable cut came at a small, hastily arranged family meeting, weeks after my departure. My name had already been quietly removed from company documents. My designs attributed to a collective design team. Father, his face grim, announced my formal severance from the family, not just the business. Sophia has chosen her path, he stated, his voice flat, emotionless. And we, as a family, must choose ours. Her decision has created a void, a wound, in the heart of Vance's velvet. Effective immediately, she will no longer be considered a part of the family's inner circle, nor will she have access to any family resources or trusts. He looked directly at me, his eyes devoid of warmth. You wanted freedom, Sophia. But understand the cost. The silence that followed was heavy, final. It was the sound of a door slamming shut. Not just on a business, but on a lifetime of belonging. I walked out of that room, not just disowned, but utterly, terrifyingly. The betrayal was complete. Leaving the Vance estate felt like stepping out of a gilded cage and into a howling wilderness. The initial euphoria of freedom quickly gave way to the stark reality of my situation. My family, true to their word, cut me off entirely. My bank accounts were frozen, my credit cards deactivated. The comfortable safety net of inherited wealth and privilege vanished overnight, leaving me with only the clothes on my back, a small bag of essentials, and the burning passion for filmmaking that had cost me everything. The world, once a familiar playground, became a harsh, unforgiving landscape. I rented a tiny, rundown apartment in a gritty part of the city, far from the polished elegance of my former life. The vibrant colors of my fashion sketches were replaced by the muted tones of poverty and struggle. My days were a grueling cycle of odd jobs, waitressing, dog walking, anything to pay the exorbitant rent and buy cheap groceries. Nights were spent hunched over my laptop, learning video editing software, drafting script ideas, and constantly reminding myself why I had made such an extreme choice. The glamour of my previous life faded into a distant, almost unreal memory, replaced by the persistent ache of loneliness and the gnawing fear of failure. The silence from my family was deafening. No calls, no texts, no olive branches. It was as if I had simply ceased to exist for them. I tried, initially, to reach out to Theron, sending a few heartfelt messages, hoping for a flicker of our old sisterly bond. Her replies were terse, polite, and pointedly business-focused, never touching on personal matters. Hope you're doing well, Sophia. We're launching the new spring collection next month, keeping busy. Each message was a cold reminder of the chasm between us. A stark illustration of how completely she had chosen the family legacy over me. My father's words, "You are destroying your family's legacy," echoed in my mind during my lowest moments, twisting into a cruel mantra of self-doubt. Had I made a terrible mistake? Was my dream truly worth this pain, this isolation? There were days I almost gave in, almost picked up the phone to beg for forgiveness, to return to the suffocating familiarity of Vance's velvet. But then I'd look at the small, framed photograph I carried with me. Nana Vance. Not in her stern business attire, but a younger version. Her eyes alight with a mischievous spark, holding a paintbrush. Her quiet encouragement, her secret dream, became my enduring anchor. Slowly, painstakingly, a seed of resilience began to sprout from the scarred earth of my new life. The struggles, the rejections from potential film projects, the endless grind, they didn't break me. Instead, they forged a new kind of strength, a grit I never knew I possessed. I began to find beauty in the mundane, stories in the forgotten corners of the city, authenticity in the raw emotions of everyday people. My camera, once a hidden treasure, became an extension of myself, capturing the world with a newfound depth and honesty. The pain of my family's betrayal became a fuel, a fierce determination to prove them wrong, not just to them, but to myself. The golden cage had fallen, and though the wilderness was brutal, it was also, finally, truly my own. Years passed, marked not by lavish fashion seasons, but by countless hours of relentless work, countless rejections, and slow, incremental victories. My tiny apartment transformed into a makeshift editing suite, fueled by instant coffee and a burning ambition. My first documentary, a raw, unflinching look at the forgotten artists living on the fringes of the city, gained unexpected traction at a small independent film festival. It wasn't a blockbuster, but it was enough. Enough to earn me a small grant. Enough to secure my next project. Enough to prove that my chosen path wasn't a whim, but a calling. I built my production company from the ground up, starting with a borrowed camera and a fierce dedication to untold stories. My name, Sophia Vance, no longer carried the weight of inherited luxury, but the quiet respect of a burgeoning filmmaker. My films were gritty, authentic, and emotionally resonant, exploring themes of resilience, community, and the human spirit in the face of adversity. Each project was a testament to my journey, a defiant declaration that my voice mattered, even if my family refused to hear it. The scars of their betrayal remained, a constant reminder of the cost of my freedom, but they no longer dictated my direction. Then came Echoes of Silk, a documentary exploring the lives of forgotten artisans in remote villages, struggling to preserve ancient textile traditions against the tide of mass production. It was a passion project, born from my own complex relationship with fabric, a way to reconcile my past with my present. The film resonated deeply, earning critical acclaim and a coveted international award. The screening was a whirlwind of flashing lights, excited chatter, and genuine admiration, a stark contrast to the stifling curated applause of the fashion world. As I stood on stage, holding the award, a profound sense of validation washed over me. This was my legacy, forged in hardship, shining brightly under my own steam. Word of Echoes of Silk reached the Vance estate, not through me, but through the media. I heard snippets through old acquaintances, whispers of my family's surprise and disbelief. My father, I was told, had been seen watching a clip of the film on a news segment, his expression unreadable. Theron, now a co-CEO of Vance's Velvet, reportedly dismissed it as a niche success, hardly comparable to a global fashion empire. But Aunt Isolde, ever the keen observer of public perception, was apparently furious that my success, ironically, was drawing positive attention to the Vance name, albeit in a way she couldn't control. Their reactions, though indirect, confirmed that my existence, my thriving without them, was a thorn in their carefully cultivated narrative. The ultimate moment of confrontation, however, came unexpectedly. A major cultural magazine, doing a feature on Echoes of Silk, requested an interview with my family, hoping to explore the fascinating backstory of a fashion heiress turned award-winning filmmaker. My heart pounded when I received the call from the journalist. The Vances had always meticulously controlled their public image. And this unexpected spotlight on my story, and by extension, their past, was bound to ignite a firestorm. I knew this was my chance, not for revenge in the traditional sense, but for a profound act of truth-telling. The phoenix had risen, and now it was time for the world to see its wings, and the embers from which it had emerged. The game was about to change, irrevocably. The magazine feature, titled From Silk to Silver Screen, Sophia Vance's Unlikely Journey, sent shockwaves through the elite circles where Vance's Velvet reigned supreme. It wasn't just my story. It was their story, framed through my lens of truth, revealing the sacrifices, the expectations, and the ultimate severing of ties. The journalist had skillfully woven in excerpts from Nana Vance's journal, giving her long-suppressed artistic dreams a public voice for the first time. The article wasn't sensationalist, it was elegantly understated, making the Vance family's denial of my artistic pursuits seem narrow-minded and even cruel, especially in light of their matriarch's own hidden passions. My family's carefully constructed image of unwavering loyalty to legacy began to fray. Social media buzzed with discussions about creative freedom versus familial obligation, with many commentators siding with my struggle for self-discovery. Fashion critics, who had once lauded my early designs, now looked back with a new understanding, seeing the constrained brilliance, the stifled potential. My father, Lysander, was reportedly incandescent with rage. Aunt Isolde, whose job was to manage the Vance brand, was scrambling to contain the narrative. But the truth, once unleashed, was impossible to put back in its cage. The biggest impact was on Vance's velvet itself. The article, while praising my filmmaking, subtly cast a shadow over the brand, hinting at a rigid, unforgiving corporate culture. Sales dipped slightly, and more importantly, a new generation of designers and talent, who had once flocked to work for the prestigious house, began to look elsewhere. The legacy that my family had so fiercely protected was now, ironically, being questioned, not by me, but by the very public they sought to impress. My destruction of their legacy, as they called it, was manifesting not in a direct attack, but in a gradual erosion of their carefully cultivated mystique. Theron, who had inherited my father's drive and Aunt Isolde's strategic mind, was the one who finally broke the silence. Her call came weeks after the article's publication, her voice tight with suppressed anger and something else I couldn't quite decipher. Perhaps a flicker of fear. "Sophia," she began, her usual composure cracking. "What have you done? You've jeopardized everything. Our brand. Our reputation. Years of hard work. For what? To air our dirty laundry in public?" Her accusation was still rooted in their perspective, unable to see the profound truth I had finally spoken. "I didn't air dirty laundry, Theron," I replied, my voice calm and steady. "I simply told my story. The truth of my experience. A truth that began with Nana Vance's own silenced dreams and continued with my own." There was a long pause, filled with the unspoken weight of our shared, yet divergent, pasts. "And the years of hard work you mention? Those were also my years, Theron. Years I spent trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. Years I sacrificed my own voice for a legacy that refused to acknowledge my true self. This is not about destroying, Theron. It's about building my own truth, even if it shakes the foundations of yours." The line went dead. The reckoning had begun. Not with a bang, but with the quiet, unsettling power of a story finally told. The fallout from the magazine article and my unapologetic stand intensified. The once impenetrable facade of Vance's velvet began to show hairline cracks. The family, particularly my father and Aunt Isolde, dug in their heels, publicly dismissing the article as misinformed sensationalism and me as a disgruntled former employee seeking attention. But their efforts to control the narrative only made them seem more out of touch, more rigid, especially as younger generations embraced authenticity and rejected corporate dogma. The irony was palpable. Their desperate attempts to protect their legacy were, in fact, accelerating its subtle unraveling. Theron, however, proved to be more pragmatic. She saw the shifting tides, the subtle but significant dip in younger demographics' interest in Vance's velvet. The brand, once seen as timeless, was now perceived by some as old-fashioned, even stifling. I heard through mutual contacts that she was quietly pushing for modernizing initiatives within the company, trying to introduce more contemporary designs and embrace ethical sourcing, a direct response to the unspoken critiques raised by my films. Her efforts were met with resistance from my father, who saw any deviation from tradition as a weakness, a concession to a world he refused to understand. One cold afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor at my small production office. My mother, Serafina. She looked fragile, her elegance slightly dimmed, her eyes holding a deep sorrow I recognized from my childhood. There were no grand pronouncements, no dramatic pleas. She simply sat across from me, her hands clasped tightly, and for a long time, we just looked at each other. Two women separated by years of unspoken words and shattered expectations. "I read the journal, Sophia," she finally whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I read all of it. Your Nana, she truly wanted to paint." A dam broke within me. Years of pain, resentment, and a yearning for her understanding flooded out in tears. My mother reached across the desk, taking my hand, her touch soft and familiar. "I was so afraid, darling," she confessed, her own tears now flowing freely. "Afraid of what your father would say. Afraid of losing everything. I loved Nana, and I saw her sacrifice. I didn't want you to struggle like she did. Or like I feared you would if you defied them. I tried to protect you, in my own misguided way, by keeping you safe within the legacy." Her words weren't an apology, not explicitly, but a confession of her own fear, her own quiet suffering, her own long-buried regrets. Her visit was brief, a quiet moment of connection that felt more profound than any grand reconciliation. As she left, she pressed a small, intricately carved silver locket into my palm, a piece I recognized from Nana Vance's personal collection. "She gave me this before she passed," my mother murmured. "She told me to give it to the one who truly understood her heart." With that, she was gone. Nana's secret and a profound shift in my own heart. The family, as a unit, was still rigid in its judgment, but an important thread, a vital connection, had begun to unravel their carefully woven tapestry of denial. My mother's act was not just an acknowledgement. It was an unspoken blessing, a quiet act of rebellion against the very forces that had shaped her life. Years turned into a decade. My film career flourished, each documentary pushing boundaries, telling vital stories, and garnering critical acclaim. My production company, Echo Films, was now a respected name in independent cinema, a beacon for authentic storytelling. I had built my own legacy, brick by painstaking brick, not with silk and sequins, but with light and truth. The scars of my past remained, but they were no longer open wounds. They were reminders of resilience, of the strength found in choosing one's own path. Vance's Velvet continued, but it was not the same. My father eventually retired, his vision becoming increasingly antiquated in a rapidly changing world. Theron, now the sole CEO, fought valiantly to modernize the brand, introducing sustainable practices and incorporating new technologies, all while battling the lingering traditionalism that still clung to the company's roots. She had, in her own way, acknowledged the need for change, perhaps influenced by the quiet storm I had created. Aunt Isolde faded into the background, her influence waning as the world moved on from her brand of calculated elegance. I saw Theron occasionally at industry events, always from a distance. There was a palpable shift in her demeanor. The guarded, slightly resentful sister had been replaced by a woman who carried the immense weight of a global brand, her face etched with a newfound understanding of the pressures I had once faced. One evening, at a charity gala, we found ourselves standing near each other. No words were exchanged. But as she turned to leave, her gaze lingered on me for a moment, and in her eyes, I saw not resentment, but a flicker of respect, perhaps even a hint of regret. It wasn't a grand reconciliation, but it was enough. It was the quiet acknowledgement that we had both, in our own ways, fought for our versions of legacy. My mother remained a quiet presence in my life, sending me small, thoughtful gifts and encouraging notes. She never asked me to return, never spoke ill of my father, but her unwavering support was a balm to my soul. She had found her own quiet courage, her own way of honoring Nana Vance's true spirit. And Nana's locket? It became my talisman, a symbol of the strength that comes from embracing one's authentic self. A powerful reminder that true legacy is not about inheritance, but about impact, about living a life that is true to one's deepest convictions. My most recent film, a sweeping historical drama, premiered to a standing ovation. As the credits rolled, showcasing the hundreds of names who had brought this vision to life, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had built a new family, a community of artists and storytellers who shared my passion. My name, Sophia Vance, no longer belonged to a fashion empire, but to a world of endless stories. The dreams I had once thought I was destroying were, in fact, the very foundation of my own, vibrant, self-created legacy. I had carved my own canvas out of the wilderness, and on it, I was painting a life more vivid, more meaningful, and more profoundly mine than I could have ever imagined in the shadow of Vance's velvet. And that, I realized, was the truest form of justice and healing I could ever achieve. Thank you for listening to this story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimately, healing. If this story moved you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more tales of family betrayal.